Okay, well, welcome everybody to the North Cascades Audubon Society presentation, Marine Birds of the Salish Sea. We are recording this, so you'll be able to find it on our website in a little while. My name is Pam Borso. I'm the education chair, and I'll be presenting along with Paul Woodcock, who is the field trips chair. And so we will get started on this. We're very glad to have you here today. We're glad to be able to do this for you. I want to first acknowledge that we live and work on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish peoples. That includes the Lummi Nation and the Nooksack tribe, and some of us the Semiahmoo peoples as well, who have lived in this region from time immemorial. We acknowledge and support the tribe's treaty rights and express gratitude for their enduring care and protection of the lands and waterways. Now, I imagine that most of you have been on Zoom calls before, but if you haven't, here is some information. The event will be recorded. Please mute your microphone, and you can turn off your camera. This will help with our bandwidth. And also, if you want to just see the presenters and the presentation, you can switch to presenter mode, I think it's called, as opposed to gallery mode, speaker mode as opposed to gallery mode. That's what it is. So to ask questions or make comments, you can click on the chat in the toolbar by moving your mouse toward the bottom of the screen. The chat box will appear, and you can type your question to everyone, and then we'll be sure and get it. And we will stop periodically to answer questions. Okay. So we're going to start out by showing a few of our incredible birds here that we see. Some of these in the summertime, some in the wintertime. This is a summertime view of a pigeon guillemot. Very orange legs.
Oh, isn't he darling? Well, it's a good thing you're muted to this meeting.
Right. This is a horned grebe in breeding plumage. We very rarely see them looking like this around here. We will show you later what they look like this time of year. Here's a Bonaparte's gull in non-breeding plumage, and we will again show you what it looks like in breeding plumage. These are our gorgeous harlequin ducks. Named because they look like clowns, I think. Is that right, Paul?
That's it.
And a beautiful western grebe. And a Heermann's gull. This one I believe is in breeding plumage. Is that right, Paul?
Yes, it is. And it's a bird we only see here in late summer, early fall.
Okay. Get my notes out here. Okay, we're going to give you a few statistics over the last 50 years. The bald eagle, we get to see more and more because they've increased by 187%. And that's due largely to, in the early 60s, the publishing of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, where she talked about DDT and how it was affecting our birds. And since they stopped spraying DDT and banned it from the United States, the bald eagle has had a great recovery. And the harlequin duck is doing quite well. And has increased by about 20% in the last 50 years. A few of the other ones haven't done so well. Common goldeneye is down by nearly 50%. Surf scoter down by about 60%. Brant by 73%. Common loon is up. Western grebe is down by over 80%. We are losing birds. A paper was published in October of 2019 that told us that over the last 50 years, we have lost approximately 2.9 or close to 3 billion birds with a B. And this is due a lot to a lot of different things, but habitat destruction and climate change is one of the big things that is driving this. The Audubon Society has published a new climate change report called Species on the Brink. And you can go to our National Audubon website and you can click on any species that you like and look at its prevalence, its projection for extinction or threatened status, and also see the places where it's going to increase habitat or it's decrease habitat, and places where we can as an organization, a conservation organization, really have an impact on helping to preserve this habitat that they're going to be losing. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about basic bird identification tips. And in general, you want to look at the body shape and a lot the silhouette, because we have very gray days here in the wintertime, and that's when we'll mostly see these birds, unless you have a boat or a kayak and you can get out into the water and out into the deeper water where you'll be able to see the pelagic birds. Pelagic means seabirds. The shape of the bill, that can really narrow it down for us. And then to look for specific patterns, the light and dark areas, and the colors that might be present. We're going to be concentrating on the marine birds of the Salish Sea, and that means mostly saltwater birds, but they do go inland to the Great Plains and north to Alaska and the Arctic regions to breed. So one of the things that's very important is relative size. If you're looking at a bird on the water, you can't always tell what it is by the size of it. And if you take a look at these, you can see the mallard, which we all kind of know. And these our smallest diving duck, the buffleheads. And you can see that unless you see something with a lot of white on it out on the water, it might be very hard for you to tell what it is. So we want to look at the silhouette, the general shape. How does the bird hold its head? How thick or long is the bill compared to the head? How thick or long is its neck? How slim or chunky is the body? And if you can see the tail, how long it is. So here's an example of a diagnostic element to this bird. Most of these cormorants hold their head upward like that. And then this is one of their smaller geese. It's got a thick, kind of short neck, kind of a chunky body. So we want to look at all of these things when we're looking at a bird. If you can see its tail, how long is it? What its general shape is. Okay. Then we want to look for patterns as well. Here is some topography for a bird. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but these are what people use to refer to parts of the bird. A lot of the time, so out here you'll see the tail. Sometimes this will be dark and it's not really the tail. It's actually the wingtips. And we'll show you some of the birds that you might see that. And then also the wing speculum is some ways in which we are able to look at birds and be able to tell what they are. Okay. And here's a double-crested cormorant. The resources that we've used for this presentation are all right here. The Sibley Guide, National Geographic, Peterson, some of the basic well-known guidebooks, Wikipedia, the National Audubon website, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website, all about birds, bird web, and the library, the good old library. You guys remember the cards, the Dewey Decimal System? I'm dating myself here. Okay, we're going to start with loons and cormorants. Most of this presentation is presented in taxonomic order. Can you talk a little bit about that for me, Paul?
Well, that is, of course, how birds are classified, and it has to do with, well, what is general relationships and evolutionary order. Really, it's changed regularly, so this order has changed from where we are right now, but I think this is a really good order to really do identification and compare birds that are much alike. So.
Okay, so here we go. This is the red-throated loon, 24 to 27 inches, 3 pounds. You can see it breeds in low tundra wetlands, bogs, winters in relatively shallow sheltered marine habitat, which is our shores here. This is its breeding plumage, and this is its non-breeding plumage. It's mostly white throat in non-breeding, an upturned bill, not quite parallel to the water, and much more pointed bill, and it's thinner than the common loon, which you'll see in a few minutes. We rarely see these birds in this plumage. Weighs only 3 pounds. Here's a Pacific bird. This is a stunning bird in breeding plumage. Weighs about 3.5 pounds. In non-breeding plumage, it's mostly gray or black and white, as a lot of the birds here are in the wintertime. And they have this coloring as a protection from predators. If they're seen from something flying overhead, it's harder to see them if they have a black back on the dark water. And if they're seen from a predator under the water and it's looking up, their white bottom is harder to see against the white sky. They breed on the very far north on freshwater tundra lakes. They winter in oceans, sometimes in bays or estuaries near a coast. All these loons eat fish and aquatic invertebrates. Again, its bill is parallel, pretty much. And it's a little larger than the red-throated loon, but not as large as the common loon. Here's the nesting and breeding areas and wintering areas of the common loon. They're 30 inches long. They're 6 to 13 pounds. They're a huge bird. They have a thick neck and a very stout bill, 3 to 5 foot wingspan. They're usually alone. Their legs are set far back on their body. Most loons and grebes are. They cannot walk on land. You never find them landing on land like you do the ducks that we know, like mallards. To me, they look sort of like a tugboat in the water. They're very low. Here's what they look like in breeding plumage, probably with the two little chicks which ride around on their back. They are a diver. These first, the loons are all divers. And you want to talk a little bit about the difference in their silhouette here, Paul?
Yes, well, really, all three of these loons are very distinctive in their shape. It takes time, it takes effort, and just a lot of viewing to get used to that. But if you look at the head of this common loon, you notice it's kind of flat-topped. Not always, but it's a little more angular in shape, very large bill. The other two loons, quite a bit smaller, rounder heads. And the slimmest, of course, is the red-throated loon, and it often holds that bill pointed up. So, or, you know, I mean, at least at an upward angle. So you actually can get to see these guys at a distance and actually figure out which one they are.
Okay. So these guys, often you'll see them peering down underwater, and then they can dive for up to 2 to 3 minutes, and they can go as deep as 250 feet, take fish up to 10 inches, crustaceans, amphibians, leeches, whatever they can get their little beaks on, or their big beaks, actually. A dagger-like bill, low in the water. These birds are the only bird that I know of, and Paul, I'm not sure about this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, that have solid bones. And can you talk a little bit about their diving?
Well, if you've watched loons underwater, you can be surprised by how suddenly they can just sink out of sight. And the thing is that their weight is fairly neutrally buoyant, so they're easy to sink in the water, and they use that. So they hold a lot of air under their feathers when they're on the surface, and they can just squeeze that air out, which makes their body heavier, and they can just sink. So if you've watched loons, you may have seen that happen, where just suddenly they just go down without any effort whatsoever. Sometimes they just hunt with their heads under the water and the bodies on the surface, and other times you'll see them with their head out of the water and their body under the surface. Also, cormorants will do that.
Yes. So here are all three of them together, and you can get an idea of how they differ. The common loon is on the left, and the slightly upturned bill on the right of the, am I right, the red-throated loon, Paul?
Correct.
And then in the bottom, you can see them side by side, and the one on the very bottom with a little bit of a necklace in front is a Pacific loon. And you can see that in the winter, they have much more gray and dark on their head and less white than this one, the red-throated loon.
You might want to also, Pam, if you could go back, you notice the bottom, in the bottom picture, not that far back, the bottom picture you see, well, this one is good.
Okay.
You see that the common loon has that angle on the neck between the white throat and face and the back, while in the lower one, you see the Pacific loon with a nice, clean line between the white, and that makes it really fairly easy to tell them apart at a distance on the water, as long as you've got some light on them.
Great. Those are great tips, Paul. I've forgotten to mention that we have Deborah Kay with us also, who is actually monitoring the chat. If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will stop periodically for the questions. And also, she's letting more people in. There she is. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you very much for being here. We couldn't do it without you. So the double-crested cormorant is about 32 inches. So it's actually probably as large as a loon, but not as heavy by any means. They have an orange throat, and they have this hooked bill, which is very different than the dagger-like bill. should probably have stopped my clock, of a common loon. You often see them with their wings drying out or cooling. They don't have a real good repellent system like a lot of the other birds. The first year bird is very light, thick bill, and it's more brownish or tan, and the older birds are black. They swim low in the water. They have this beautiful eye, this turquoise eye, and they have this kind of hooked, it's almost like a seagull, a gull with a hooked. In the wintertime, they all have lighter breasts and they have an orange beak. This is a juvenile though. They feed on fish, amphibians, and crustaceans, and they nest and roost in colonies. This is a colony of a nesting colony. If you want to see their nesting colony, you can go to the Blaine Harbor breakwater and look out from the road down there, and you can see them nesting in, when is it, Paul? May, June?
May, June, and into July.
Into July. And also another bird that we will be looking at much later is the black oyster catcher, and they also nest. And a good way to see these birds' nests and to be able to get close enough to them is to go in a kayak around the breakwater and look. The other cormorant we have around here is the pelagic cormorant. It has a very thin bill, thin neck, and it's much smaller and it's very dark. This is its non-breeding plumage on the left. Here is it really likes these outer areas. It winters along here. Breeding, you can see them breeding if you go in May, June to the Anacortes Ferry dock. They have the cubby holes that the long pilings are held together with. You'll see the cormorants and gulls nesting in there. In breeding plumage, they have red skin at the base of their bill, right in here, and they have a white patch on their flank when they're breeding. So they're smaller, they're black with green and iridescent. They nest on cliffs as well. They have a shorter tail than the double-crested cormorant. Okay, are there any questions that have come into the chat, Deborah, about so far?
No, we haven't. Just going forward, be sure to let people know which picture is of a male or a female bird.
Okay. So far,
Another question I saw was people didn't know what the colors on the geographic maps were in terms of what color is winter and breeding and so on.
okay, great. We will address that as we go forward. I did see one question in there real early on. So the 2.9 billion birds have been lost in the last about 50 years. Someone asked how long is it, has it taken us to lose 3 billion birds? So the next birds we're going to look at are grebes. These again are divers, and we will talk about the colors. This is a different color, and you can see that they have a key there, so this will help a lot. They breed in the inland lakes. There's some permanent resident down through the middle of Mexico, and then they lots of times will winter along our coast. Non-breeding resident is blue, but we have had western grebes, according to, and I believe this is this CBC statistics. We've had 10,000 western grebes in the Bellingham Bay about 40 years ago. Is that right, Paul? In the 70s.
Wintering, yes, I think it was even over 10,000.
Yeah, but now according to our breeding or our Christmas bird counts, we can sometimes, see up to 200 in Bellingham Bay?
That number is rising again, but it was down to where we could find very few, say about 10 years ago.
Okay. So they are 22 to 29 inches. They breed on freshwater lakes. They breed in floating nests that they attach to plants that are in the freshwater lake. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see this and hear this. Let me know if you cannot hear it. Can you hear it, Paul?
During spring on the freshwater lakes of Oregon, grebes join together to renew their partnership.
Okay, hang on. I'll have to see. There we go. Now can you see it and hear it?
During spring on the freshwater lakes of Oregon, grebes join together to renew their partnership.
Thank you, Jim. These are their feathers.
The ceremony starts with a series of graceful duets in which one partner echoes the actions of the other. But the real test comes now. Only the strongest and the most faithful are prepared to join together for the final exultant dance.
Well, I have never had the pleasure of seeing that, but I think, Paul, you have, right?
I have one occasion.
And where was it?
It was in Eastern Oregon, on wetlands. And I wish I could remember exactly the location.
Would it be by Malheur, you think?
No, it wasn't. It was, okay. So it was more central, and it was definitely west of there.
Okay. So if you want to see them doing that dance, you're going to have to get out there and look. But so they are diving, and both the males and females look alike. They eat fish, insects. This is what they look like when they're diving. This is what they look like when they're resting. They look sort of like a gray donut with a black jelly middle with a white stripe. So if you see something out in the bay looking like this, a bunch of them together, those are probably some resting western grebes. There's a Clark grebe. They're a look-alike, and they're not found here. They're found in northern Idaho and further south. So we have horned grebes here, and the blue is the breeding, and the orange is the wintering. They are also diving birds. They eat aquatic insects and fish. They have this beautiful, incredibly beautiful plumage. They breed inland on freshwater lakes. However, this is how we see them. They have a short bill, which would easily fit the length of the head. So lots of times when you're looking at these grebes, you can tell by the length of the bill what it is, just in silhouette. If it's a short, kind of a cute bill, it's most likely a horned grebe. And then it's got a lot of white on the front of its neck and up, not above the eye. A red-necked grebe, this is what they look like in breeding plumage. They breed in the way far north, and they winter along our coasts. These birds that we've talked about so far, you can see them all at Semiahmoo, and sometimes down in Bellingham Bay. And then in the wintertime, they are very gray, but they're very stout. You can see they have this stout beak, and they're just a thicker, bulkier bird than the horned grebe, and also than the western grebe. So here's a redneck grebe and a horned grebe, kind of side by side, and you can talk a little bit about that, Paul.
Well, here obviously the bill is in silhouette is the characteristic that's most important for identification. Obviously, the horned grebe is quite a bit smaller bird, but unless you see them alongside of something that gives you a measure of relative size, they can still be confusing.
Yeah. Here's a red-necked and a western compared, and you can see the western grebe has a much longer, thinner, even more pointed bill. It looks to me like the red-necked grebe, you could just fit the bill inside the length of the head, and with the western grebe, you probably could not. What do you think, Paul?
It's a little longer. Yeah, it is. And it's also much longer necked, but you don't always see that. And that's
Right.
not as apparent. Birds can change their shape immensely. So.
Yes, they can. So here they are all together, and you can kind of see their differences. The horned, I think, is cute. I call little birds like that with the little short bill cute. The redneck looks hunky, and the western looks elegant to me. That's how I would describe them.
So the western grebe is just a little bit heavier than the redneck, but it's quite a bit longer. So it's a larger bird. And of course, you see the neck. The neck is really a good comparison if it's in basically in a posture that you can see it.
And then we have another bird that we might see here, and it's a little chunky bird with a little chunky bill, and it's a pied-billed grebe. And it's mostly in freshwater, but we do see them out at Semiahmoo in the marina enclosure. And they're opportunistic feeders, as are all birds, of course. And they build floating nests anchored to aquatic plants. This is their breeding and non-breeding plumage. They're basically a brown bird. Okay, does anybody have any questions yet about anything?
Yes, we do have a couple of questions. One of our attendees said that she has seen cormorants nesting in trees in Olympia. Do cormorants have different nesting sites for different areas?
You need to do something more than nod, Paul. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, the answer is definitely so. It's interesting because usually, I mean, trees is unusual, I think, for double-crested cormorants because they're usually on rocks or on rocky shores. But they have a lot of colonies. They're often being persecuted by human activity purposefully because fishermen really feel that they take a lot of their catch. So they've been moved out some areas along the Columbia River. But actually, right here in Blaine, Washington, right at the border, is one of the larger nesting rookeries of double-crested cormorants north of the Columbia and even north of California. So.
Right.
We have another question. Do we know why specifically that we have lost so many western grebes?
You know, there's a lot of speculation about that, but it probably has to do more with human use of their habitats, because obviously, if you put a floating nest on any lake where there are power boats and even to some extent in marshes where kayakers go, it can be a real problem for them. There's probably more to it than that. Climate change could be part of it, but the fact that they're making some comebacks now is a good indication that there's still enough habitat for them, and hopefully their numbers will continue to rise.
Well, thank you. We also have another question. Where and what time of year around here would be good to see the grebes dance?
Yeah.
Well, that would be probably May into June, and possibly on, I think the area I was in eastern, it was more western Oregon, was around Sisters. There were some wetlands. And I think that there's a Potholes area, Potholes Reservoir.
In eastern Washington, yeah.
In Washington, yes. That would be another place where it would be possible to see them.
So it would be eastern Washington or Oregon, eastern British Columbia. During May and June, they nest on freshwater lakes that are not too bothered by motorboats.
Thank you. We just have a couple of other comments. One person said they were spoiled, and it's an everyday occurrence in San Diego. Not sure which bird they're referring to, though. And then another person said the bridges of Vancouver is festooned with nesting cormorants.
Cool.
There you go.
And there you have it.
Thank you very much. So now we're going to look at our geese that we see here, at least a couple of them. The Canada goose, most people can recognize. It breeds in the Arctic to the southern US. They have always been migrants. It's unusual, but they're now breeding around here because we have made wonderful habitat for them by making lake shores with grass. And so, but they feed on grasses and sedges, and they, in the fall and winter, they like agricultural grains. There is a smaller bird, which we don't even have a picture of in our presentation here. It's called a cackling goose. It looks almost like a Canada goose, but it's just about 2/3 of the size. And it's hard to tell them apart if you don't have them side by side.
And we do have the cackling goose here right now at this time of year. They winter here in our local farmlands, but not out on the saltwater very often.
Right. I saw a few in Drayton Harbor today next to some Canada geese, and that's the only way I knew that's what they were. The other goose that we get here in the wintertime is a wonderful little cute goose I call cute. It's a brant. They nest in the far north in Siberia, and they have a white rump or butt, I guess you'd call that, and that beautiful necklace that they have, a little short bill. We're going to talk a little bit about a very important area called the Eisenbeck Lagoon. You can see the star where it is on the outer islands of Alaska. The single most critical fall staging habitat is near the tip of the Alaska Peninsula, the Eisenbeck Lagoon. Nearly the entire world population of the black grant spends as long as 9 weeks here because there are extensive eelgrass beds. Eelgrass is as much as 99% of their diet. And they all usually leave within the same 12-hour period and arrive at their winter destinations 60 to 92 hours later. And this will show you where they breed, which is up in this green area, and also in Siberia. And then their migration is these yellow areas. And along the East Coast, they come down and winter here in the blue or gray, and along the West Coast. So in the springtime, they'll go up along here and feed on this eelgrass and then go up here to nest. In the winter, they come back here, feed on the eelgrass, and then head straight across. And in some cases, they'll head straight down to Baja. And again, do up to 60 to 92 hours later, they arrive at their wintering grounds. This Eisenbeck Lagoon is extremely important, and they're always trying to put a road out through this area. We have so far been able to prevent them from putting roads out there, because what that will do is really put this wintering or this feeding area at risk. So if you ever see a petition or have a chance to write to your Congress people about how important it is to preserve the Eisenbeck Lagoon, please do so.
I'd like to add, here we're going to talk a little bit about the eelgrass, but the brand are dependent on that eelgrass habitat. That's why they're wintering here along our coastlines in areas that have eelgrass. And because it is in the shallow water along the shorelines that are being developed, there's a lot of impacts that are hard on the eelgrass habitat. So it's very important. The birds are dependent on that.
Thank you, Paul. Also, most of these birds that we're telling you about, you will be able to see at Semiahmoo. Semiahmoo is an important important bird area. I think there are 45, I don't remember how many, all over the world, but it is an international area, Semiahmoo, and it's because of the eelgrass beds that we are able to host the winter grounds for so many different birds here. Okay, so these and the Canada geese are dabbling birds. They are not diving birds. And you can see this one upended. It's a pretty comical sight. It's very comical to see a swan, which is dabbles, and to reach its long neck down to the bottom of a pond or water, and Canada goose dabbling. They're huge to upend like that. They will, the way that they eat eelgrass, I don't know, they don't have any mechanism to suck it in like we do a spaghetti noodle. So what they do is they manipulate the eelgrass, like they fold it like an accordion, back and forth, back and forth. And then when they get into a little packet, that's just a little square, they swallow it. And so they also are able to eat roe or eggs of Pacific herring and crustaceans and mollusks that are on that eelgrass. So any questions about the geese?
We're going to have a couple questions, but I just need to get back to that. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Okay, here we go. So this actually is about back up to cormorants. So the person who had seen the cormorants nesting in Olympia, that was, let's see, it was, oh, just a minute. Oh, Woodward Bay Conservation Area on Henderson Inlet. And they thought they were seeing double-crested cormorants, but they wanted to know if perhaps they could have been pelagic.
I would say almost definitely not pelagic, because we see them mostly in outside the breeding summertime breeding period here, and they tend to head out to the San Juan Islands. So there's not much local breeding, and I don't think they would be inland at that point.
Okay. We also have a little tidbit of information. Many brants go to Padilla Bay in Skagit County as well. There's the largest continuous eelgrass meadow in the lower 48.
Right. Thank you very much. Yes, that's true. I hadn't mentioned that, but yeah, that's another place down along Padilla Bay that you can see a lot of these birds that we're showing you today.
Another person had a comment, but about the language we use when we talk about birds and habitat. We call it development. So it's really more like destruction in terms of its impact on countless living beings. And certainly we can think about that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that feedback because I totally agree.
Yes, I agree too. Hazel Dickens had a saying. She said, you know, people say you can't stop progress. She said, you know, I think we can stop calling it progress. So now we're going to look at diving ducks. And the closest thing to a duck are the scops. They look very duck-like. They act very duck-like, but they dive. They're 15 to 18 inches. There are lesser and greater scop. And it's hard to tell them apart. The lesser breeds on lakes, rivers, and ponds, and the greater breeds in the Arctic. They eat aquatic invertebrates, crustaceans, plants, insects, and seeds. So they're a real generalist too. The males have this lighter color, gray on the back, and they have these blue bills. The females have at the base of the bill this white outline. And when I'm looking out on the water and I see a very duck-like looking bird and I can only see this white at the base of the bill, I often look for the gray back, and then I can tell that it's probably a scop. Okay, so there are ways to tell them apart. You can talk a little bit about that, Paul, if you want.
Yes. Well, the shape of the head, the size of the bird, these, I believe, are lesser scop. And what I use, because even when, long as their head is out of the water, you can see the nail at the tip of the bill, which is a little black with a dark point on the end and the end of the bill. And especially if you go to the female on the right, you can see that's just, there's, go down to the other one there. You can just see there's a little black line. Well, that nail is quite a bit wider at the bottom on a greater scop. That sounds like a that sounds like a hard thing to see, and it truly is. But they're hard birds to tell apart because it's posture, shape, and a little bit on size. Unless they're right next to each other, it's pretty hard to discern by their other field marks. But that one, if I can get a look at the bill, I can be fairly sure that I'm seeing a lesser or a greater. Sibley shows that pretty well in his field guide.
Thank you, Paul. So here's our harlequin duck, 15 to 21 inches. These guys, I think, are very cute and very stunning. The males are just gorgeous. You can see they breed in the far north, but they also breed near inland streams. So if you go into the mountains, you can see pairs of these at the larger inland streams, and they breed there. They have a dainty bill and a steep forehead. You can see that. The female has a white spot right behind its eye. And their tails, lots of times when they're out on the water, their tails are uppy. They kind of hold them up. Here's a long-tailed duck, and you can see why it got its name. This is non-breeding plumage, which I think is stunning. These are males, these two on the top, and these are a pair. This is what a female looks like in non-breeding, and we see them here only in the winter time, and usually later in the winter and further out. The place that you can most reliably see these guys are out at the very end of Semiahmo Spit on the dock, looking out towards White Rock, and out in the middle of that channel. You can sometimes see them flying by or diving out there. Very rarely do we get to see them close. Here's their breeding plumage. It's quite different. They feed on many things, as you can see here, and they breed in ponds and streams and other Arctic wetlands, winter in the open ocean or on large freshwater lakes. Here's a female with her young. Some of the loss for some of these birds that breed in the Arctic is due to the permafrost melting and incursion of seawater into those freshwater ponds that they depend on to breed in. And as soon as they become stagnant, or what do you call it when brackish, they can no longer, the eiders and some of the other ducks can no longer breed on those ponds. Any questions about those last few that we covered?
No, no
Nope.
questions about those birds.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll look at the scoters. We have 3 varieties: surf, white-winged, and black. Here's a surf scoter. The breeding is in the far north. The blue is the wintering. You can see that they have this huge bill, and they eat bivalves. They're 19 inches, average weight of 2 pounds. This is a male right here. This is a young male. Doesn't yet have its headlight. It kind of is starting to get its tail light. That's what I call these, a headlight and a tail light. And they feed on mollusks, invertebrates, freshwater invertebrates. They swallow them whole. Here's a female. And here's a male. So they're entirely black, except for the white patches, their white forehead, white eyes. And then they have this enormous large bill, which is truncated on both sides and multicolored, and it can appear kind of orangish or light at a different distance. Here's the male and some females. They winter in shallow marine coastal waters over pebble and sand bottoms, so you'll find good numbers of these out at Semiahmoo and probably Padilla Bay. And these are the females, which have the 2 spots on them, kind of a straight spot here and a spot back here underneath and behind the eye. Here's a male and a female together. And here's a white-winged scoter. Now they're larger than the surf scoters, and the females have a white patch behind the eye and white at the base of a very large bill. And they have this, they're called white-winged scoters because they have a white patch on their wing. And the males have this comma or Nike swoosh right under the eye, and they have a red tip of the bill. Paul, can you talk a little bit about this part?
Well, the white-winged scoter has a feathered, fleshy area that covers about half of the length of the bill on top. And it is actually the largest and has the largest gape, so it can eat the largest bivalves. And that's an interesting thing about the 3 scoters we have, is that the black scoter, which is coming up, has the smallest bill and dives the shallowest, and usually feeds a little closer into shore. And they're all dependent a lot on bivalves. And so the white-winged scoter can dive the deepest and take the biggest bivalves. The surf scoter is sort of in between, and the black scoter has the smallest bill, and you'll see that when we get there.
Here's more information on the white-winged scoter. Can't always see the white wing on it, but often you can see this comma. Here they are comparing both of them, the male surf scoters and the male white wing. And here's our black scoter. They breed on arboreal ponds. The female has this white patch. They are the cutest scoters, I say. Smaller bill, they're more duck-like. They have a rounded head. The males have this orange knob. And these you see in much less numbers. If you get to see a black scoter, you can consider yourself very lucky, because it's very difficult. There are not very many of them around. And here they are, the males and females in a pair together. Aren't they elegant and stunning? They're so sweet. Here you can see them compared. Here's the black the head profile, the white-winged. See, the gape goes all the way back here on this bird. It's why they can take those big bivalves. And then this is the surf. Okay. So we're going to move on to the, are there any questions about the scoters, Deborah?
Yes, there are. First off, what's the best document, place, or book to learn about the current population status of, oh, wait a minute, goodness. Of each marine bird species that depends on the Salish Sea? I've visited the Cornell lab online, but curious if there is a better, more specific Pacific Northwest document.
Well, I don't know of any specific to the Northwest. You can go to the Audubon climate report and click on a bird, and that will tell you about its habitat, but I don't know how much information they have specifically on the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
I'm not aware either of anything really specifically. I would think that there must be research being done. I know that locally research has been done over the past few decades, but I don't know of any particular reference. So I would have actually said go to Cornell, but it's a good question, and I'm sorry we can't answer.
We have another question. Is the knob on the bill to help remove salt?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's the color. The color is probably pretty much just either sort of decorative, probably to attract the opposite sex. I know what's being referenced is the tube noses, the seabirds that have the little tubes, nostrils above their bill. And I know that that's the purpose for those, but these birds' nostrils are actually right there in the bill. So I don't believe that's it at all.
Okay. We also had a question if someone wanted to know if we have a range map for the black scoter.
I don't have one in this presentation, but you can find it online or in a book.
Okay. We also have someone who wants to know, how do these birds digest bivalves?
That's a really good question. And actually, they can crack them with their bill. It's that powerful. And then they usually regurgitate the shell pieces and digest the soft parts, the edible parts.
But they also swallow them whole. And they have some sort of a gizzard that's going to grind up all of that stuff so they can get rid of the shell, or the shell may become part of the gizzard. I don't know for sure. I haven't really studied scoters much.
We have another question. Why aren't black scoters as prevalent? Because of habitat destruction, or just because?
I think on the west coast, the black scoter is not as common as it is on the east coast of the U.S. So I'm just not sure how many breed, on the west coast that come down from Alaska. It's just, I think, and this is a question I'm actually taking a guess at, but I think it's really just not as populous here on the west side of the continent.
Okay. One person wants to know if there's a chance of getting the slides after the class.
This presentation will be on our website.
Okay. There's another person who has referencing progress. And while this podcast may not speak to everyone, this person said they found it remarkable, insightful in many ways, felt as though I'd always known the truth of it intuitively. And it's a story, I guess, in Emergence magazine. There's a link that's in the chat, so perhaps people can look in the chat for that. Also, there's a question, what if the bivalves are toxic, as we are told at times, that the scoters eat?
Yeah, I don't know how that affects, I mean, I'm sure it does affect our wintering birds, but
Yeah, I believe the toxicity is mostly in the summertime, and I'm not sure that it would apply to birds. I don't know about that, but
yeah, I don't either.
yeah, that's research that we'll need to do. Good question. Thank you.
And it looks like that's it.
Okay, good. So now we're going to look at goldeneye. This is a common goldeneye. It has a circle, a white circle on its, right behind its bill, under its eye. It has a golden eye. The male has a lot of white on it, underneath and on the back. The female has a grayish back and a brown, reddish brown head, black bill with an orange tip. These are cavity nesters. They breed on wooded lakes and ponds. They are also diving ducks. And here is some of their, this is what they do to attract, the males do to attract the females. There we go. You can see that they are showing off for the females and for each other. Makes my neck hurt to just look at it. But this is a courtship display. The females are going to act pretty bored. So maybe it's just the males showing off for each other. Who knows? I have actually seen them doing this in eastern Washington in the spring. So the other goldeneye that we have around here is a Barrow's goldeneye. They're 16 to 20 inches. They have a crescent shape in front of their eye, the base of their bill, instead of a circle. And on their back, instead of all that white, they have these little white patches. I call them barrels, so I can remember the name Barrow's goldeneye. They do breed in open lakes and small ponds, and they're a cavity nester as well. This is the female. It has a completely orange bill with maybe a black at the tip. And it looks to me like a bobblehead out on the water. And these birds you can find at the end of Semiahmoo Spit. You can find them all along Drayton Harbor and Semiahmoo Bay. But at the end of the spit, at low tide, you'll see them pulling mussels off of the pilings. They like to eat the mussels. And I'm sure they eat all kinds of other things, fish and such. Here's Paul, you tell me, I forgot. This is a pair of
Paracommon and then a female Barrows in the back. So
Barrows with the orange bill. Yeah.
You can tell the females apart by the bill. But where it really is the problem is the young birds have uniformly brown bills, and it can be really difficult to tell them apart. You got to kind of look for that large head shape with the steeper brow that the Barrow's goldeneye has.
So you can look in here. This has a steeper brow. This is more sloped.
And I see someone just posted, and I was going to mention this, is that Barrows are fairly common anywhere in shallow water, close into shore. They kind of like boat harbors. You can see them around Fairhaven and in a lot of boat harbors around the Salish Sea in our area.
Okay. And here's the bufflehead. It's also a cavity nester. It breeds in the Arctic and tree cavities. There's a lot of white on the male. It's our smallest diving duck. A lot of white underneath and on the head, and the female has just a patch of white under its eye and in the back. And you usually see them, you know, either in a pair or with a bunch of them because they don't hang out together much. So any questions about those last, the golden eyes and the buffleheads?
I was going to add that the bufflehead does breed in eastern Washington, so it comes down through the freshwater lakes in Canada, and
Right.
do find them east
You
of the mountain.
you can see that in here. Thank you.
One of our participants says that they see Barrow's goldeneye in Bellingham Bay near Taylor Dock along the ramp.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. The more eyes that are out there, the more we can let people know where these birds are. Any other questions? Nope, guess not. Okay. So now we're going to look at mergansers, another diving duck. Common merganser, 22 to 27 inches. Got a lot of white on it. It's pretty large. Dark head in breeding. And orange bill. They eat mostly fish. They have this long serrated bill where they can hold fish in it and manipulate it around so they can swallow it whole. They can be a cavity nester. They can also on the ground. And then female and non-breeding, they often look like this. They are mostly freshwater, although you will see them sometimes in salt water, especially if the inland waters are frozen. The hooded mergansers are mostly freshwater. This is a stunning bird, and they have the ability to raise and lower that hood. And they are cavity nesters, and you can see one here coming out of a nesting box. And if you ever want to see a fun YouTube, go to YouTube and just search for hatching mergansers or wood ducks, and you'll see how they come out of this nest box. When they're about 24 hours old, they're just a little fluff ball. They come, 20 or 30 of them will come climbing out of this and jump 50 feet down to the land or the water. It's just the most stunning thing. And then the ones that we see in the salt water mostly are the red-breasted mergansers. And these are the males. They have this punk kind of a hairdo. The females are brown and they have these orange bills. And they will nest in a brush pile on the seashore or inland. And the male has a curtsy, a courting curtsy that they do for the females, which you can see in this lower right-hand corner. Okay, any questions about the mergansers? Anything you want to add, Paul?
Yeah, the red-breasted is a northern breeder, so we don't have them breeding in this state. They just started here in winter.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions right now.
Thanks, Deborah.
Welcome.
Okay, now on to the alcids. The alcids are more pelagic or seagoing birds, but we wanted to put them in here because we will see a couple of them around here in the wintertime. And if you have a boat, you'll be able to see them if you're in the summertime out there, you'll see them in breeding plumage, and in the wintertime, you'll see them in non-breeding plumage. They actually fly through the water. They feed on fish, crustaceans, and marine invertebrates. Here's a common murre, 15 to 18 inches. This is what they look like in breeding. Here we've got a family in breeding plumage. They usually lay one egg on a rock shelf coastally. And this is what they look like in non-breeding. They still have this little line going down just like this one in the breeding plumage. We have the pigeon guillemot, which you saw at the very beginning of our presentation. It's black and white in the summer. And in non-breeding, it is again just this black and gray study. We can see them lots of times off of the end of the Semiahmoo dock. And they lay 1 to 2 eggs in a deep crevice or burrow, probably 6 or 8 feet, in sand, big bluffs is what I'm trying to say. And they breed, and there's a big study of them done on Whidbey Island. And they probably breed around Point Whitehorn and some of the other bluffs that are around here. Anything you want to say about these, Paul?
Well, I was going to add just what you did, that they are a local nester, while the murres, out in the islands, they do breed, but these are the ones we might see all through summer close in.
Okay. The marbled murrelet, very dicey reproductive strategy. They breed in old growth forests, and 150 years ago, the old growth forests went down to the water's edge of our salt water, which is where they feed. So they didn't have very far to go. However, now some of these old growth forests are 50 to 60 miles inland. And they don't even make a nest. They find a large, broad, moss-covered branch, and they lay 1 egg, and they feed the babies twice a day. They go in the morning and the evening, and they go as far as they need to go to find food for them. This is what they look like in breeding. They're brown, so they blend into the forest. And in non-breeding, they are looking more like the black and white that we see. And Paul, where can we see these?
Well, I've seen them out on Bellingham Bay, out from shore, so there must be some possible breeding areas in close. Not many these days. I see them mostly in winter. Close by, some areas to see alcids here would be down Anacortes, south of here. Washington Park on the south side of Anacortes, you can actually see marbled murrelets and ancient murrelets from shore if you've got a pretty good pair of binoculars.
And there's the ancient murrelet. And again, they breed in colonies on offshore forested islands in a burrow or a fallen log. Again, they're slightly different in breeding than non-breeding. The ancient murrelet has a lighter bill and this little streak on its head in breeding, and that's gone in non-breeding. And then the rhinoceros auklet, 1 egg in a burrow on forested islands, breeding and non-breeding. And Paul, talk about the breeding business here.
Well, the rhinoceros auklet gets where its name comes from, it gets a little horn on its bill during breeding plumage, and it gets those nice whiskers, those white whiskers. This is a bird pretty closely related to the puffins. And actually, I have seen these from the shore in Bellingham, out on Bellingham Bay, so there are numbers of them around. Especially when they have a good breeding season.
Okay, any questions about the alcids?
Yes. First off, what is the brown bird in the common murre slide?
That's a common murre.
Okay.
It's really just light coming on it from a different angle. So
it could be also a young bird because it doesn't have that white streak.
The next question is, are their feet still red in winter?
Pigeon guillemot are.
Pigeon guillemot, yeah, but they're not as bright. I mean, they're more orangey yellow in winter.
And the inside of their mouth is orange too in summer.
I think it stays that way all year.
Yeah.
Haven't checked though.
What time of year is breeding for marbled murrelets?
It is high summer, so that's when they're, obviously now that our old growth forests are gone from the coastlines, they're flying 30, 40 miles. And so they put on a lot of miles to go out and collect food and bring it back to their young in the forest.
Yeah. They probably start laying in May and then incubating through June and feeding through July, probably somewhere in there.
One person notes that there are several pairs of marbled murrelets in Burroughs Pass and Wat Mau Bay on Lopez.
Very good.
Nice.
So there must be some forests up there that are able to
Support them, yeah.
breed. Yeah.
The marbled murrelet, we did have the local Audubon mounted a campaign a couple of years ago when they were going to bring a off-road ATV group. They wanted to open up trails to off-road vehicles on Sumas Mountain and Red Mountain. And these are protected and set aside marbled murrelet habitat. So you can imagine how far marbled murrelet has to fly if they want to breed on Sumas Mountain to get to saltwater. That's easily, what, 30 miles maybe? 20 miles away?
Over 20, I think.
20, yeah. So these are the kinds of things that we help. And we actually got that stopped with the city council. Other questions?
Yes, someone wants to know, when do the murrelets breed?
May, June.
Okay, and then we have one more question. Any tips or ideas for the best way to quickly differentiate the common murre and the marbled murrelet in non-breeding plumage, all black and white, at a quick glance? It's hard to ID based on size when nothing else is around for comparison. Perhaps the bill size? Any other thoughts?
Let's take a look. Here's a non-breeding marbled murrelet. It's got a big white back here. It's got a little white on the wings and white here. And here's the murre. And you can see that there's a stripe going down from the eye. Oops. And the white goes almost to the back of the head. Let's go and look again. Yeah, so I would just look in a book, or I'd go to the Sibley book, which has the non-breeding plumages, and I would compare them. Or I'd go to All About Birds, or I'd go to Cornell Lab and just look at or I'd even Google non-breeding murrelet versus murre, and they will give you pictures.
The bill is really pretty indicative. I mean, it's really a tiny little bill on the marbled murrelet. The murre tends to, to look a little more loonish in its shape. And
a little bigger. Does that help? Okay, any other questions?
That's it for now.
Thanks, Deborah. Okay, we're going to take a look at gulls. Now, there's lots of gulls out there, and most people just sort of give up on gulls because they are so ubiquitous and so similar. But we're going to give you a few tips here. So all gulls eat small fish, marine invertebrates, lizards, eggs and chicks of seabirds, and they scavenge carrion and refuse. So they are generalists. They're bird feeders. Here's the Bonaparte's gull, which is pretty striking, and we should be able to tell the difference. We usually don't see this in breeding plumage. We may see it getting into breeding plumage. They breed around lakes and marshes in the boreal forest, and they winter sometimes here, and this is what they look like when they're here. Sometimes you can see them, tell me, Paul, is it Marine Park in Blaine? Off the end there?
yes. and that's usually in migration, actually, but
Okay.
um,
Which is going to be what, fall and spring?
fall and spring. Yep. Let's see, May and August, September.
Yeah. They do an open cup of twigs in a tree or bent over rush. The mew gull is one of the smallest gulls. It has black wingtips, yellow legs, and a yellow bill with no markings on it. They breed in the tundra. They winter here. You can find them Bellingham Bay, Semiahmoo. There, they have a shallow cup of vegetation placed in a tree or on the ground for their nest.
We can see flocks of mew gulls also out on the farm fields this time
Oh,
of
yeah.
year.
And a real, yeah, very, go ahead, I'm sorry.
They're quite common on our shorelines.
Right, and a really good place to see them is in the Safeway parking lot. Just as you pull into it from the freeway, just on the left, before you get to the Safeway, they hang out in that parking lot. In fact, that's where I learned to ID mew gulls. So ringbill, huh?
About the Bonaparte skull is that out in the San Juans, there are flocks of Bonapartes all winter long, but we just don't see them here from our shoreline.
Okay. Ring-billed gull, again, black wingtips. This is not the tail of the bird. These are the wingtips. And they have yellow legs, but they have this ring on their bill. And they have a red ring around their eye and breeding plumage. And in the wintertime, they have this kind of darkish head, but they still have this ring. And they still have the yellow legs and the black wingtips. They're usually eggs, they lay their eggs on the shore, and they breed in colonies on the ground near water. The glaucous wing gull is our most common gull. The adult is very beautiful white, has this very large bill with a red spot on it, has gray wingtips, pink legs. Juvenile, Paul, talk about how long it takes this bird to reach.
Oh, yeah, glaucous is a 3-year gull, so they go through 2 summers after their juveniles before they reach adulthood, and I guess that's it.
Yeah, they breed sometimes in colonies. They will breed on flat roofs of buildings. They'll also, where they and the Caspian tern breed on the building that's across the channel from the Bellwether Hotel in Bellingham. I have seen glaucous wing gull babies on rooftops, peaked rooftops in Blaine, and they just do sometimes a scrape in the ground or on a rooftop. The western gull, which we rarely see here, usually you'll have to go as far west as Sequim or out into the San Juan Islands. Is that right, Paul? Are they in the San Juans?
They make it into the San Juans, but it's mostly the Straits of Juan de Fuca and out on the outer beaches.
Yeah, they have black wingtips as well. They are as large as the glaucous wing gull, and they will hybridize. So if you see a bird that has a light gray back, like a glaucous wing gull, you see how it's a lighter gray back, and black wingtips, it's most likely a crossbreed, a cross glaucous wing western cross. And in non-breeding, this is what they look like, and also juveniles look like this. They're much darker than juvenile glaucous wing gulls, and they have the dark wingtips. Again, they nest in a scrape and often in colonies with other gull species. And they roost in fields, dumps, and parking lots, forage at sea.
And while we see very few western gulls here, we do get a lot of the hybrids. So if gulls aren't confusing enough, that adds to the confusion.
Right. And then the Heermann's gull in breeding is this white and gray, but in non-breeding, so they breed along. Talk to us about the breeding and when they get here, Paul.
Well, they breed from California, Southern California, south. And so after they're done and they're young fledge, they start wandering north. So we see them late summer into fall. And they're always kind of nice to see. So adds a little variety here.
They have a very bright orange bill, and you can see these in non-breeding plumage, oftentimes off of the Kingston ferry dock. They're on the floating booms that are there. I've seen many of them there. Many, what do I want to say? Half a dozen. But I mean, that's most commonly where I see them. Again, shallow depression in the ground, in colonies. They winter along the coast and out to sea, rarely inland. Caspian tern. We see this bird in the summer. Sometimes, again, from the Bellwether Hotel, they will be flying over. You can hear them. Their call is like a cat on fire. You know, it's just a terrible sound. They feed each other. They dive for fish. They are colony nesters. We did have, was it 10 years ago, Paul, that we had a colony nesting at Georgia Pacific?
Well, it seems like just a few years ago, which means this probably was 10 years.
Big colony there, but they got hazed away. They get shoved out of their breeding habitats easily. And we have a black oyster catcher that we can see around here. You can see it down at Larrabee. You can, if you're kayaking, you can see it at Semiahmoo on both sides of the spit. Very commonly up by the dock where the cormorants roost and the seals haul out. They have this very orange bill. They eat mollusks, mussels and limpets. And they nest in a scrape in the ground. And again, I understand from kayakers who have told me they have seen them breeding by Larrabee and on the breakwater at Blaine.
I've seen great numbers along the Swinomish Channel down near Anacortes and LaConner.
Great.
For all of you that aren't from this area, that probably doesn't help much, but they're there.
Okay, so we're going to cover birding ethics a little bit for walkers, boaters, and kayakers. We want to promote the welfare of birds in their environment. That's what the Audubon is about. Be careful not to approach the birds too closely. Please, 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 if you walk your dogs, keep them on a leash on the shore. I know you'd love to let them run, but let them run in your backyard or in a field or in a dog area. Please respect the laws and rights of others, including private property. Minimize any disturbance to nesting species and comply with instructions in posted areas. Birds who are resting and feeding on sandbars or mudflats should not be disturbed. If you fish or if you find fishing line, please dispose of it and nets in a closed trash container. There are birds who will get caught up in these things. If you're fishing and accidentally catch a bird, reel it in carefully and be careful with it because it may try to hurt you when you're trying to release it. Keep your boat in good repair. Please don't feed any birds or other wild animals from your boat. Please do not feed birds bread. Birds, that's not a good, especially white bread. It's not good food for birds. If you want to feed birds, feed them cracked corn or whole wheat. Okay, so this is a double-crested cormorant in full breeding plumage. You very rarely will see this bird like this, but I thought it would be a real fun picture to close with. Here is my contact info and Paul's contact info and our website. And now we will take any other questions that you have to conclude our talk.
And thanks to so many of you for sticking with us all this time.
Thank you so much. Any questions?
No questions, right? Oh, wait.
We'll give you a few minutes to put your questions in.
We have one question. Someone wants to know if there's any chance we'll return to Tuesday night programs.
Yeah.
Not for a long while. We go according to national and state Audubon guidelines. And right now, we are offering a few very limited field trips of, you might check on our website to see when we will offer some more. But no, we're not doing any real public things right now. Our field trips are limited to 4 per leader.
So our museum had just opened for a few weeks with limited visitors, and they just had to close again because of new state guidelines, and I think that that's why. So we will try to do field trips with a few people, socially distanced, and do the best we can.
We will try to schedule some field trips. If you're absolutely dying to go on a field trip, contact me and I'll see what we can do about scheduling field trips to see these birds. We will take you out to see these birds. And we will see if we can accommodate as many people as might want to go on a field trip. We would be going out to Semiahmoo for those field trips, and we would be socially distanced and masked, and we would limit those to 4 per leader. We do have a few leaders that are willing to lead, so we may stretch it out. You can see these birds all winter long, so we may stretch our field trips out over the winter. So just keep checking with us, or if I can schedule them, I will contact you back. Unless, Paul, would you like to be the contact person, or you want me to be the contact person?
Well, either or. That's
Okay,
fine.
either or. All right.
I'm sometimes very slow to reply, so.
Yeah. And the programs that we're presenting now, we are presenting other programs. So look at our website under events, and there's where you will find out how to register. We will have a program in December on winter bird smarts. And in the spring, we're going to look forward to maybe an intermediate birding program and a beginning birding program like this. It will present the birds and how to identify them and where you can find them. But the programs that our 4th Tuesday programs are going to remain online, and we may schedule some others kind of in between just because we know you're hungry for programs. But they will be Zoom programs, and most of them will be recorded, and we will post them on our website for you. Any other questions?
We have one person who wondered why we had no sandpipers or plovers on your presentation, and they wanted to know if they were not migrating in this area.
That's a really good question. And my answer would be that's a whole other program. I mean,
Right.
And so,
Yeah.
so we'll give you a little taste of the sandpipers by showing one of our brightest, more showy ones. But that is a very complex group of birds, and I know what birds are here, but it's a class we'd have to develop separately.
Yeah, we haven't developed that program yet. I'm working on it. So look for that. Stay tuned. We don't have a whole lot of shorebirds here that we can see reliably. We can see them in migration, but yeah, we are looking at developing that program, but it's going to be a while for that. we decided to just concentrate on the birds that we knew you'd be able to see now, which is why we decided to present the program now. You can go out right now and see most all of these birds, but the alcids.
And if I can elaborate a little bit, I mean, right now we've got black oyster catchers. Well, we've seen the black oyster catcher. We have black turnstones, which is what I meant to say. A lot of dunlin, some sanderlings. Of course, we got killdeers hanging out on the beaches too. But right across our border, if we could cross it, there is world-class winter birding along Boundary Bay, but we can't get into back and forth to Canada at the present time. So, but there's a lot of shorebirds around, especially numbers of dunlin like you wouldn't believe. But.
One of our participants would like to know who are the major predators of marine birds in this area?
Well, they're around too. When we go out to Semiahmoo, which is one of my favorite places, there's a county park and there's a lot of development on it. It's a spit, for those of you who don't know this area, and there's a lot of development on it now. But we often see this time of year at least one peregrine falcon, and they are, I would say, the primary chaser of shorebirds here. There's a lot of eagles around, but they tend to go for the slower moving creatures.
Right. But they will take gulls and anything that they can get their talons on.
Yep.
Another person asked about puffins. What about puffins?
From our shorelines, we don't see puffins, but they are out again in the San Juan Islands. And we do have breeding tufted puffins out there. And occasionally even, okay, what's the other northern species? The horned puffin shows up. So puffins are here, but we don't see them from our shoreline.
Right.
But that would be a bird, when we're talking about the whole Salish Sea, that would be a bird that we should add, would be the tufted puffin.
In the summer, you can find them on Protection Island outside of Port Townsend. They're breeding there. And you can take a whale watching puffin cruise out there. The other place that we can see them is on the shore, on the west coast shore, the ocean, out north of Pacific Beach. But you have to get special permission to go. It's off of the Indian reservation that's out there. I can't remember.
Macaw?
No, south of there. But yeah, that's where they breed in the summertime.
Quileute?
Quileute.
Quileute, or that starts with a T. Tahuya, I think. Yeah. Just north of the big lake out there.
Crescent?
Yeah, no, not Crescent. The big lake that's north of Pacific Beach. So it's like
Quinault? Are you talking about Quinault?
Quinault. Thank you, Lake Quinault. It's by Lake Quinault. That's where you can see them. I have seen them off of the shore there in the summer. If you go to the, if they ever have it again, the Grays Harbor Shorebird Festival, they have field trips that take you out to see the puffins.
One of our participants says that they have seen shearwaters in Bellingham Bay recently by the hundreds. Where are they migrating from and to?
I don't know. That's interesting. I'd have to go take a look.
Another participant would like to know, when is the winter bird count and how can we help?
Generally, the Christmas bird count is in December. This year, it's a little different because of COVID. We are doing a reduced number bird count. So we're not inviting people who have not already been counters on this year's count. We're we'll probably open it up. It'll probably be safe next year, next Christmas bird count. Look on our website. We are always letting people come out with us on these Christmas bird counts, but we just can't do it this year because of COVID. Everybody has to go in a separate car, and the counters have to go in separate cars. The tabulators have to be out there with the people who are counting, and you have to be distanced and masked. So we're just not going to invite new people in this year. But thank you for asking, and please check back next year. You can, Paul, what is it? The Great Backyard Bird Count you can participate in?
Yes, that's.
And that's in February?
Yeah.
Can you know about that?
Yes, I don't have details, but I do know it takes place. I've taken part in it on occasion.
Yeah. It's called the Great Backyard Bird Count. If you Google it, it happens in February. And you sign up to count the birds in your backyard. I was thinking about shearwaters. I know they migrate usually late summer, early fall, and you see large numbers of them off the coast, but I've never seen them here in Bellingham Bay. So if that person could email me about that, I would like to know more. I'd love to see them. Aren't they generally an ocean-going bird, Paul?
Yes, and usually you see large numbers of mostly sooty shearwaters way out off the coast. You know, you can see them out in the distance.
One person mentioned that they were lucky enough to see the common pochard in Victoria. And they're rare migrants who must have taken a wrong turn on their way south to Southeast Asia. I don't know if anyone knows about that bird.
No, I'd love to see that.
Yep.
I don't know how I'd get to Victoria. So
Yeah.
Someone else wondered if there were dunlin at Semiahmoo.
Yes.
yes, not well from a distance you might see large numbers. When the tide is out, there's enough tide tracks there that definitely there could be dunlin off. But you'd probably see them if you just went and walked the beaches there, at least flying in the distance, if not in close.
And the other place we forgot to mention that you can see a lot of these birds is in Birch Bay. There's a lot of these birds are in Birch Bay, and when the tide is out, there's shorebirds, yellow legs, and dunlin and whatnot that are out there.
One of our attendees would like you to again tell us what that amazing bird is that's on our screen right now.
It's a double-crested cormorant in breeding plumage with its crests out.
And then another person wanted to let us know that there are puffin cruises with San Juan Cruises. In 2021, they'll be on Wednesdays out of La Conner.
Great.
It says
Thank you.
June to July.
Wonderful.
And you talked about Project Feeder Watch. I don't know if you've mentioned that.
No, we didn't. But Project Feeder Watch is another one. Go look that up. I don't have any information on it.
One other person wants to know if dunlin can be seen all year at Semiahmoo.
The short answer is no. They're Arctic breeders, and so we see them coming down probably early October, and then they're heading out by early April.
Okay, and the last comment we have is that someone found a wedge-tailed shearwater among a group of gulls on the water this past summer. It was amazing.
Wonderful.
It would be. Yeah, great.
Where were they? That's great, though. Yes.
You can unmute and tell us if you want.
Oh, it was a single bird.
Uh-huh. Yeah, a wayward bird, but that's great. I love to run and see those kind of things if I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Well, if there are no other questions, then I just want to thank you all for being here. We've got a few people left, but we're winding up now. And look for our programs on our website. You can register and come to our monthly programs. You can come to our bird presentations. You can come, and if we have field trips, you can register and come to our field trips. So we again appreciate your support. Audubon is a completely volunteer organization. We do not get money from anybody but you. So if you feel like donating to us to continue these free programs, we would surely appreciate that. Have I forgotten anything, Paul?
Well, I just want to say thanks again. I'm almost 50.
Or Deborah?
They've stuck with us for 2 hours. That's
Yeah.
really remarkable.
Thank you for staying with us.
Thanks. Loyalty. I love it.